The New York skyline blazed gold in the late afternoon sun, but inside the Rothman penthouse, the world felt frozen. Sophie Rothman sat in her wheelchair by the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city she could no longer walk through. Once vibrant, now paralyzed, she carried the weight of anger and despair like a second skin. The doorbell rang. She ignored it. "Ignore it," she muttered. The door opened anyway. George, her father's IT specialist, stepped in, calm and unassuming, carrying a worn leather briefcase. "You must be Sophie," he said softly. "I know who you are," Sophie snapped. "And I know why you're here to babysit me. My father paid you for this humiliation." George didn't flinch. "I'm here because your sister needs help. This contract, it was the only way." Sophie's laugh was bitter. "You call this help, pretending to care while living in my house, using my family's money." "I'm not pretending," George said steadily. "I risked my life testing treatments to keep you alive. Every moment, every choice was for you." Her eyes widened. "You could have died." "I knew the risk," he replied. "But some things are worth it. Your life, your future, they are." Sophie's anger wavered, replaced by something unfamiliar, curiosity, maybe even gratitude. "I don't need anyone," she whispered. "Maybe not," George said, "but I'm not leaving, not now." For the first time in months, she truly looked at him. Calm, patient, devoted, and despite herself, a small ember of hope flickered inside her. "Fine," she said, voice trembling. "You can stay, but don't think I like it." George smiled faintly. "I don't expect you to, I just want you to live." As he wheeled her toward the physiotherapy room, the sunlight haloed her hair. George's heart ached, knowing the next 3 years would be long, painful, and humbling. But for him, no humiliation, no anger, no betrayal could stop him. Some promises, love, devotion, sacrifice, were worth everything. The first morning felt like a war. Sophie sat stiffly in her wheelchair, arms crossed, glaring at George like he was a storm she didn't want to weather. "You can't just wheel me around like some object," she snapped. "I'm not wheeling you," George replied calmly. "I'm helping you regain control, step by step." Sophie scoffed. "Step by step, you mean humiliation by patience." George ignored the jab and set up the small physiotherapy equipment. "You think this is easy for me too, watching you suffer, seeing the smallest progress feel impossible." Sophie's scowl faltered. He wasn't pretending anger or frustration. He genuinely cared. Why are you even doing this?" she muttered, voice almost breaking. "I promised your sister I'd help, and I promised myself I wouldn't quit on you," he said quietly, "even when you hate me." She looked away, embarrassed by the heat rising in her chest. No one had ever spoken to her like that, not even her father. Days passed, each one a small battle. Sophie tested his patience with sharp words and impossible requests. George endured silently, sometimes smiling at her defiance, sometimes quietly fighting back tears of exhaustion. He tested medications on himself first, adjusted routines, and researched every experimental treatment, always prioritizing her safety over his own. One evening she caught him asleep in the corner of her room, head resting on his arm, surrounded by open medical journals. She froze. You've been doing this all for me." Her voice was barely above a whisper. George blinked awake, embarrassed but steady. "Every day, every risk, every sleepless night. You mean more to me than you'll ever know." Sophie's walls cracked. For the first time, she didn't look away. Her anger, her fear, even her stubborn pride, they all wavered before the quiet devotion in his eyes. "I hate that I'm feeling this," she admitted. George's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You don't have to like me yet. Just let me help you stand." Outside, the city lights blinked like distant stars, unaware of the quiet revolution happening in a penthouse. Sophie Rothman, heiress and prisoner of her own body, was beginning to see that some people, some love, could not be bought, coerced, or ignored. And George, He silently vowed that no wall she built, no humiliation she hurled, could stop him from keeping his promise. The morning light spilled into Sophie's room, painting the walls gold. For the first time in weeks, she didn't wake with dread. Instead, she felt curious. George stood at her side, adjusting the small parallel bars for her therapy. "Today, we try standing," he said simply, but his calm tone carried a weight of quiet encouragement. Sophie glared at him. "Standing? Are you insane? You're going to break me." "I'll make sure you don't break," George replied, sliding a hand gently under her arm. "You just need to trust me." She hesitated. Her legs trembled even at the thought of supporting her weight. Memories of the accident, of helplessness, fear, and failure flashed in her mind. But then she looked at him, and for reasons she didn't fully understand, she felt a flicker of courage. "Fine," she muttered, gripping the bars. Minutes passed like hours. Her muscles screamed, her balance wavered, and sweat rolled down her temples. George's presence was steady, his hands always there, not hovering but guiding. Every time she faltered, he whispered encouragement. "You can do this. Almost there. Don't give up." Finally, after a shaky breath and trembling legs, Sophie stood, unsupported if only for a moment. Her eyes filled with tears, not just from the effort, but from the realization that she could still fight. George's face lit up, a rare, unguarded smile. "You did it, Sophie, you actually did it." For a heartbeat, they just stood there, the city sprawling behind her, the golden morning catching her hair like a halo. And then, almost involuntarily, Sophie said softly, "Thank you, I." George's expression softened, but before she could finish, her phone buzzed. A message from her father. She read it and her stomach sank. "Check the contracts again. Make sure you're not being played, Sophie." Her anger flared. "See, even he doesn't trust you." George stiffened. "I don't need their trust, I just want you to walk again." Sophie turned away, hurt and confused. The same man who had helped her rise could now feel like a stranger, a pawn in her family's games. A small seed of doubt planted itself in her heart, and for the first time she wondered, was George truly devoted, or was this all part of a calculated act to gain favor with her family? The tension lingered in the room, thick and unspoken. George's steady patience met her sharp suspicion, and neither moved. Outside, New York roared on, indifferent to the fragile human drama unfolding in a penthouse. That night, as Sophie lay in bed, her legs aching but alive with hope, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man who had risked everything for her might also be hiding something. And yet, she couldn't deny the strange, fluttering warmth that rose in her chest whenever he was near. Some promises, she realized, carried more weight than distrust. But in the heart of the city that never slept, trust would be the hardest step of all. The city lights sparkled like distant stars as night settled over Manhattan. Sophie sat at the edge of her bed, legs covered with a warm blanket, staring at George as he reviewed her progress notes. "You didn't have to risk so much for me," she murmured, her voice barely above the hum of the city outside. George didn't look up. "I did, you're worth it." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to, but her family's whispers, her father's subtle warnings, gnawed at her. "How can I know you're not just after their fortune, or playing some game I don't even understand?" George's jaw tightened. "I don't want your father's money. I don't want anything from him. I want you to walk, to live, to feel alive again. That's it." Sophie's chest tightened. His eyes were unwavering, burning with sincerity, but a tiny, cautious part of her still doubted him, and that doubt hurt more than her paralysis ever had. The next morning, George helped her to the parallel bars again. "Today we push further," he said, hands steady, voice calm. Sophie groaned, glaring. "Push further? You mean torture me?" He smirked faintly. "Pain is temporary, progress is." Minutes later, she stumbled, nearly falling. George caught her instantly, their faces inches apart. She felt her pulse spike, not from fear, but from the closeness, the warmth of his hands, the intensity of his gaze. "George," she whispered, and her voice trembled. Breathe. Focus on me, not the fear," he murmured, his lips so close she could feel his breath. The room seemed to shrink. Her anger, her pride, her distrust, all of it wavered. For a moment, the only thing that existed was the man who had risked everything for her. Then her phone buzzed again, a message from her father. "Are you sure you can trust him? Check your contracts, don't be naive." Sophie's eyes flicked to George. For the first time, she saw a flicker of hurt in his calm expression. He wasn't playing a game. He had trusted her to trust him, and now that trust was wobbly. Her chest ached. Maybe I've been wrong about you," she said softly, almost ashamed. George's lips curved into a small, cautious smile. "It's okay, just take your time." But deep down, he knew the danger of her doubt. One whispered lie, one suggestion from her family could undo all the progress they'd made. And yet, he couldn't step back, not when every fiber of him was tied to her recovery, her heart, and the fragile, growing bond between them. That night, as Sophie lay in bed, her thoughts tangled with fear, hope, and something unspoken, she realized that trusting George might be scarier than standing on her own 2 feet, but it might also be the only way to truly live again. Outside, the city never slept. Neither did the quiet, powerful tension between a girl learning to walk and the man who would not let her fall. The sun had just risen over the city, spilling pink and gold across the streets below. Sophie gripped the parallel bars, her arms trembling but her legs holding steady. Today felt different, stronger, lighter. George stood at her side, ready as always. "You're doing amazing, Sophie. I think today you might actually take a few steps on your own." Sophie's lips pressed into a determined line. "Don't tempt me," she muttered, though her heart raced. Step by step, she pushed forward, George's hands hovering just behind her in case she faltered. Sweat gleamed on her forehead and her muscles screamed, but something inside her ignited. She was walking, truly walking. You're amazing," George breathed, a mix of pride and relief in his voice. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat the distance between them, the anger, the fear, the walls she had built, felt invisible. But then her phone buzzed, a message from her father. "I heard about the medication trials. Are you sure he's being honest with you? Don't let him trick you." Sophie froze, her chest tightened. She looked at George and the warmth in her chest wavered. Could she really trust him? After all the months, the sleepless nights, the risks he had taken for her, could it all be a lie? "George, I need to check something," she said, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. He frowned, a flicker of hurt in his eyes. "Sophie, what is it?" I just need to double-check your notes," she said quickly, turning her back to him. George's jaw tightened. He knew the doubts, the whispers from her family, had planted a seed. He wanted to reach out, to tell her everything he had risked for her, but he stayed still, letting her go. Later that evening, Sophie pored over the research journals George had left scattered on her desk. Every page, every annotation, every scribbled note showed the lengths he had gone to, testing experimental medications on himself, analyzing data, risking his own health, all to ensure her safety. Her hands trembled as realization dawned. She had almost doubted him, almost questioned the man who had devoted months of his life to her recovery. The guilt hit her like a wave. She ran to his side, finding him still quietly reviewing her progress logs. "George, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice raw. I almost didn't trust you." George looked up, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he smiled faintly, tired but unbroken. "It's okay. You're allowed to doubt, but I hope you never doubt my heart." Sophie's eyes filled with tears. She wanted to throw herself into his arms, to tell him everything, to erase the fear that had crept in. But a small, stubborn part of her lingered, afraid, unsure, unprepared for how much she had begun to feel for him. That night she lay awake, replaying every small moment, every whispered word, every hand that had guided her from despair to hope. Somewhere between the exhaustion and the triumph, she realized something terrifying. She was falling for him. And falling, she knew, would make the betrayal, the seed of doubt, cut deeper than anything else ever could. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the fragile trust, growing affection, and invisible tension building between a paralyzed heiress and the man who had risked everything to see her rise. The morning light spilled over Manhattan, soft and golden, as Sophie gripped the parallel bars. Today wasn't just another day of therapy. Today, she would take her first full steps without George holding her. George stood behind her, eyes calm but heart pounding. Remember, focus, one step at a time. Sophie inhaled, her palms sweaty. I can do this. She lifted her foot, then the other, and for a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. George's hands hovered near her, ready, but she didn't need them. She was walking, real, unassisted steps. George's breath hitched. You did it, Sophie, you're walking. Tears blurred her vision as she turned to him. George, I can't believe it, thank you. Her voice was raw, full of wonder, relief, and something she didn't want to name. George stepped closer, a faint smile on his lips. I told you, you just had to trust yourself and me. For a heartbeat, their eyes met, charged with emotion, unspoken words hovering between them. And then, the sound of a phone ringing shattered the moment. Sophie picked it up, expecting a message from her sister or father. Instead, it was her father himself. Sophie, I just spoke with the board. Are you sure you can trust George? I'm worried he might be manipulating you for the family's fortune. The words hit her like ice. Doubt gnawed at her heart. She looked at George, his smile, his steady gaze, and for the first time she felt the weight of suspicion. George, she hesitated, panic rising. Did you tell my father everything about your efforts, about the treatments? George's face stiffened. I may have mentioned some things, but everything I did for you, not him, not your family, for you. Sophie's chest tightened. The warmth she felt toward him wavered, replaced by confusion and hurt. She wanted to scream, to demand the truth, but all she could manage was a trembling whisper. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, she admitted, tears spilling over. George swallowed, pain flickering in his eyes. Sophie, I risked my life for you. Every sleepless night, every trial, every single moment was for you. And you doubt me. Her guilt collided with fear. I don't want to be hurt again. He took a step closer, voice gentle but firm. Then believe me, please, believe in us and what we've been through. I never lied to you. Never. The room was silent except for their breathing. Sophie's hands trembled, and she finally realized that the line between trust and betrayal, love and doubt, had never been thinner. Outside, New York sparkled as if mocking the fragile human emotions inside. And inside the penthouse, two hearts teetered on the edge, one willing to forgive, one desperate to be believed. Because in the city that never slept, love was never easy, and trust could break faster than the strongest will. Rain pelted the city streets, washing Manhattan in silver streaks. Inside the Rothman penthouse, the storm mirrored the chaos in Sophie's heart. She stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, staring at George with a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could you, she whispered, voice trembling. After everything, how could you let my father doubt me, doubt us? George ran a hand through his hair, exhausted, frustrated, and aching from months of unspoken emotions. Sophie, I did. I told him only what I had to, only what would keep your sister safe. Everything I did was for you. You have to believe me. Sophie's eyes filled with tears, a storm as fierce as the one outside. You risked my trust, my heart, and for what? So my father wouldn't worry. You betrayed me. George's chest tightened. I would never betray you. Not for money, not for anything. I just wanted to protect you and her. I thought you'd understand eventually. I can't understand, Sophie screamed, the wheelchair trembling beneath her. I've been trying, George. I've been trying to trust you to feel something real, and now," her voice broke. "Now I don't know if I ever can." George took a hesitant step closer. "Sophie, please, look at me. I've given everything for you, everything. My nights, my health, my life. I risked it all so you could stand again, so you could live. And still you doubt me." Her tears fell freely now. I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of trusting, scared of loving, scared of losing everything again." For a long moment the room was silent except for the pounding rain. George reached out, gently taking her hands in his. "Then let me stay. Let me prove to you that I'm here for every step, every fall, every heartbeat. I don't want your money. I don't want anything from your family. I just want you." Sophie's chest heaved as she felt the sincerity in his grip, the unwavering devotion in his eyes. All the walls she had built, all the pride and fear, trembled under the weight of his love. Slowly she nodded, letting herself lean into him, not fully but enough to feel the warmth and safety he offered. I don't know how to trust again," she whispered. "Then we'll start over," George said softly. "Step by step, just like your recovery, one day at a time." The storm outside began to soften, raindrops sliding down the windows like tears of their own. And inside, two hearts, shattered, fragile, yet unbroken, found a tentative bridge across the chasm of doubt and fear. Some promises, they realized, weren't easy. Some love required storms. And for the first time in months, Sophie felt a small spark of hope that maybe, after everything, they could survive this together. The early morning sun filtered through the penthouse windows, golden and forgiving. Sophie stood by the window, her legs steady beneath her for the first time in months, the wheelchair pushed aside. George entered, carrying a small, worn notebook. He hesitated, unsure if she was ready for what it contained. "Sophie, I think it's time you see this," he said softly, holding it out. She took the notebook, fingers trembling. The pages were filled with his meticulous notes, detailed records of every experiment, every risky treatment he had undertaken on her behalf, including the months he had tested medicines on himself first. Tears pricked her eyes as she flipped through the pages. Every scribble, every calculation, every desperate attempt to keep her alive, it was all for her. You did all this for me," her voice broke. "You risked your life." George stepped closer. "Every moment, Sophie. I promised your sister I'd help you, and I promised myself I wouldn't let anything happen to you. Not doubt, not fear, not even my own limits." Sophie's knees weakened and George caught her instantly. "I should have believed you sooner," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for doubting you for everything." He shook his head gently. "You never betrayed me. You doubted because you cared, because you wanted to protect yourself. That's human. And I never stopped caring either." For a long moment they simply held each other, the penthouse quiet except for the soft hum of the city below. Then, slowly, Sophie rested her head against his chest. "I love you, George. I'm scared, but I love you." "I love you too, Sophie. More than words, more than actions, more than life itself," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her hair. The months of struggle, pain, and mistrust fell away like a storm clearing from the sky. She had walked again, not just physically but emotionally, and he had stood by her, unwavering through it all. Outside, New York roared as always, unaware of the miracle that had occurred inside a quiet penthouse. Inside, Sophie and George stood together, stronger, healed, and finally free. And for the first time in a long time, Sophie felt truly at home. Not in a city, not in a mansion, but in the heart of the man who had risked everything for her. Hand in hand, they faced the world together, their hearts aligned, their past trials fading behind them. Love, devotion, and trust had won. And nothing, no doubt, no betrayal, no storm, could ever take that away. Sophie, perspective. I never imagined I could feel this, whole again. For months I had been trapped in my own body, in my anger and my fear. Every day I believed the world had turned against me, that everyone I cared about had hidden motives. I thought George was no different, that I had misread his devotion, that it was all an act to win favor or, God forbid, to take what was mine. But now, standing in the soft morning light, my legs steady beneath me, I understood how wrong I had been. I remember the first day he arrived, all calm patience and quiet strength. I had hated him immediately, convinced him to be a part of my humiliation. And yet, even then, he stayed. He didn't falter. Not once. Every risk he took, every sleepless night, every experimental treatment tested on himself first, he did it all for me. Flipping through the notebook again, I felt my chest tighten with a mix of guilt and awe. I had almost doubted him completely, let my fear override the truth. But the truth had always been there, waiting for me to see it. He had risked everything for me, his life, his health, his heart, and I had been blind. Now, as I watch him move around the room, helping my sister with her homework, laughing softly at a silly joke, I see the man who saved me in every sense of the word. Not just my body, but my heart, my soul, my very hope for life again. I take a deep breath, feeling the strength in my legs and the warmth in my chest. I realize that love isn't about perfection or control. It's about devotion, about showing up every day even when the storms rage and the walls rise. I walk toward George, unassisted, feeling the freedom of movement that I once took for granted. He turns, startled, and then smiles when he sees me. I'm ready, I say softly, almost shyly. For what? He asks, taking a cautious step closer. For everything, to trust, to love, to live with you. His eyes soften, and in that gaze I see everything I had feared, everything I had doubted, and everything I had longed for. He pulls me into a hug, and I rest my head against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. All the pain, all the betrayal, all the fear, it melts away. What remains is something simple, something profound: trust, devotion, and a love that has survived storms most people never even imagine. And for the first time, I feel truly awake. I am no longer the girl trapped by fear or circumstance. I am Sophie Rothman, alive, walking, and loving freely. And George, he is my home, my safe harbor, my future. Outside, the city pulses with life, but I don't notice. I don't need to, because I have everything I've ever wanted right here. Right here, in his arms, I am finally free.